Who can tell us the truth about life after death? This American minister who claims he was swallowed up by the fires of hell? This girl who says she saw her grandmother in the gardens of heaven? Or this Air Force doctor whose revolutionary experiments point to a more down-to-earth solution? Mysteries from the files of Arthur C. Clarke, author of 2001 and inventor of the communications satellite. Now in retreat in Sri Lanka, he ponders the riddles of this and other worlds.
All religions face the greatest of mysteries: what happens when we die? The Buddhists believe we may be reincarnated in this world. Other faiths believe the soul discards the body and enters a spiritual realm. However, a growing number of people claim they have already glimpsed an afterlife. When they were revived, after having been pronounced dead by doctors, they speak of floating peacefully down a dark tunnel towards a shining light. Sometimes they meet dead friends and members of their family.
Dr. Melvin Morse was inspired to investigate when child patients told him extraordinary stories of their near-death experiences. Many of them were too young to describe what they had seen, so Morse encouraged them to explain in pictures. The innocent artist produced graphic glimpses of childhood heaven.
Here's some drawings that children have drawn for me of their near-death experiences. This is a 6-year-old boy who nearly died during a routine tonsillectomy, had 3 cardiac arrests. And here we see a long tunnel then leading to a rainbow bridge. See the long, dark tunnel, and then this very spectacular rainbow bridge to a place he thought was heaven. This is a 5-year-old girl who has nearly died of bacterial meningitis here at Valley General Hospital. A great wealth of detail here that she was not able to articulate. And then we see her floating out of her body, so out of her body. Here's Jesus wearing a little red hat, who she said was very nice. There's 3 angels. And then this rainbow, she said, is a light who told her who she was and where she was to go. She also said this was a door where the dead people were. And this door here, she said, was where grandpas and grandmas and babies who were waiting to be born. Now, this is another patient of mine, Jessie Lott. And she nearly died of fulminant liver failure from mononucleosis. She had to have a needle stuck into her heart to resuscitate her. So that's near death by anyone's criteria.
Jessie bounds back to health, but vividly remembers her brush with death.
Well, I was just sick, and then all of a sudden, there was white lights, or white cloud type thingies around me, and I saw my grandma, and she was just sitting there in this wooden chair, and she was smiling, and she didn't say anything, but she looked, happy.
And here's her grandmother sitting on a brown chair. Her grandmother had already died, and then we see her grandmother surrounded by this white light.
When I think about it, it just gives me that warm feeling inside, and it just touches me, just to think about it, to know that if I was near death, my grandma was there. She was there to, be there with me.
Now, this is a patient of mine named Crystal Merslock, and she was 7 years old when she nearly drowned in a community swimming pool. And she said that she floated out of her body and went down a long tunnel. And here we see the ground, which interestingly enough, she draws blue as, the sky. And then she said a hole opened up in heaven, and she could see down to her brother. And she loves him very much, so she indicates that with a red heart. And as this hole opened up in heaven, in which she could see her brother, was a big factor in her deciding to return to her body.
Crystal is now grown up, She was the first of Dr. Morse's patients to describe an afterlife.
He asked me what it was like, you know, to be in a coma, and I said, oh, it was fun. Heaven was fun. I was asked by Elizabeth, my guardian angel, whether I wanted to stay or come back. And I said, no, you know, why would I ever want to leave this place? It's so beautiful. There's so much love here. And she said, okay. And I thought about it for a second, and I thought, no, I want to go back. I thought, I wouldn't ever be able to hug my mom again, or anybody I really loved. And for that sole reason, I decided to come back.
Within the covers of a family photograph album lay a forgotten picture which dramatically backed up Crystal's story.
We came to a page, and I came to realize that my great-grandma Dora was the grandma that I saw up in heaven, and I pointed to her and said, that's her. That's who I saw up in heaven, and that's my grandma Dora. And they were very surprised because she died before I had been born.
Near-death experiences tell us everything about death. The fact that when we die, our body just doesn't stop. As I used to think before I started near-death experiences, we just sort of check out into the darkness. That clearly is not the case. We will all have a near-death experience when we die. In fact, they're the dying experience.
The impact of standing on the brink of death has left its mark on the members of this Seattle support group. The annual near-death picnic provides a chance to compare notes. Bill Vandenbush was hit by shrapnel in a Vietnam airstrike.
And as I moved in the tunnel, I suddenly came into this bright white light. And once I entered the light, it was the most beautiful thing I had ever experienced. It was just wonderful. I was able to have knowledge of everything, why we're here, why we exist. It's by far the most incredible experience of my life.
Doris Jackson nearly died of dysentery in India. It changed her life.
I was walking up this path and I saw this light and I realized that there was a presence there, and this presence was warm and it was all loving, all forgiving, and to walk into that presence is totally, it's indescribable. Nothing, no feelings that we have here can match that feeling.
For Paul Carr, life's priorities are clear.
The most important thing, I think, in life is knowing that this isn't it. That if anything, this is the illusion, and that the reality is something larger.
All right.
Georgina Boyson used to suffer from depression, but now has hope.
Okay. I should probably say that before the experience, I considered myself an agnostic. And since the experience, I would say that there's something out there. Kind of whatever it is, but there is something out there.
Some controversial researchers claim success in the search for proof that the human soul can survive death. In 1907, Dr. Duncan McDougall of Boston weighed patients as they died. When one lost an ounce and a half, McDougall argued the weight loss was caused by the soul's departure. French psychical researcher Dr. Henri Baraduc found his guinea pigs closer to home. As his son André died of consumption, Baraduc tried to photograph his departing spirit. 6 months later, his wife sighed 3 times as she breathed her last. Baraduc claimed he'd captured his loved ones' souls on film.
The idea that we all have a soul independent of the body is reinforced by another quite common but uncanny type of experience. Survivors of accidents or people recovering from operations report having had a bird's eye view of themselves during this crisis. Some even claim to have seen things that they couldn't possibly have known about otherwise.
At Arnhem in the Netherlands, an emergency admission turned into a classic case of an out-of-body experience. Nurse Ton Goossens was called to the coronary care unit to resuscitate a heart attack victim.
A short while later, just a week or so, the patient came back on our CCU unit, and he had recovered very well. And when he saw me for the first time entering his room, he was very astonished, and he said, "You got my teeth, you know where my false teeth are." And I was very astonished. I didn't believe what he said, because the time I had seen this man, he was unconscious, but he saw himself laying in bed out of a corner in the small room where the resuscitation was being done. And he saw himself above in that room, in that small corner. He saw everything what happened. He saw us doing the heart massage. He saw us giving infusions. And he saw actually me removing his false teeth and put them on the shelf of just a crash car. And it was so remarkable because this man couldn't see at all. He was clinically dead at that moment.
Such astonishing stories have persuaded mainstream doctors to take near-death experiences seriously. Dr. Van Lommel is one of Holland's top cardiologists. He interviewed heart attack survivors and found 1 in 10 had floated out of their body. Van Lommel has designed an experiment to verify stories of bird's-eye views from the ceiling. It's set in a resuscitation room.
When the people get their cardiac arrest, then the heartbeat stops, the pulse stops, the blood pressure. There's no blood pressure anymore, there's no breathing, and we start our resuscitation. That means heart massage, that means electrical shocks, that means drugs. And when we look to the monitor, you see what happens to the heartbeat. It goes on, and you get a flat line on the ECG, and this is the moment the people get unconscious. They are clinical dead, and that's the moment they can have their out-of-the-body experience, that they float around somewhere out of the body, above, near the ceiling, and they can see how people are doing the resuscitation on their own body, and they can recognize everything. And in our research, we put a sign somewhere up on a lamp that they can see a sign during the resuscitation, during the period of clinical death.
The message was designed and hidden by an independent researcher. So far, no patient has found it, but Van Lommel believes it's just a matter of time.
I think it will be clear that sometime we will meet somebody who saw that sign.
The leader of this devout congregation is loved and respected by his flock. But 10 years ago, the Reverend Howard Storm was a university art professor, and not the man he is today.
Personal philosophy was to be the biggest, baddest bear in the woods. And I tried to promote an image of being harsh and mean. I know a lot of people didn't like me and were afraid of me.
One summer, Howard and his wife Beverly went on holiday to France. Howard became critically ill with a hole in his stomach. Because he was far from home, he was left untreated for 11 hours. Doctors say it's a miracle that he survived at all. Back in Cincinnati, Howard confided in his doctor. He told him his survival had been remarkable in more than just medical terms.
He described a very horrifying experience of going through a tunnel, and these little demon-like creatures were coming at him and ripping off pieces of his skin till they had really torn away all the skin from his body.
I was sure that I was never going to be back in the world again, that I was lost to the world, and that I'd ended up in this horrible, awful place full of, like, meanness and absence of anything good or nice or decent, just a place of cruelty and torment. And I recalled myself as a little child singing "Jesus Loves Me,"